Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. And in this video, I'm going over the year 1969 in music and what happened that year. Talk about what the best-selling albums were, what the Grammy nominations were, and then just major events that happened this year. Actually, I already did our top 10 albums of 1969. You can look at that in the playlist of top 10 albums every year. We covered all the 60s already on my channel. Ended with this this year, 69. So we're going to do top 10 albums of 69, and then we're moved to the 70s. So I usually do this before we do our top 10s, but I didn't get in time. So a little late, but we're going to at least cover what we talked about in our video about what were the big things that happened in this year in music. So I hope you learned something here on Jason the Old Millennial. Hello everybody, hope everybody's doing well here. What day is it? I can't remember what day it is anymore. Wednesday, isn't it? Wednesday evening. I got done mowing the lawn, and it is getting hot here in Kansas. For me, I mean, it's not as hot as it's going to be. It's going to get hotter and hotter as the summer goes, but it's getting into the 80s, so to me, plenty hot for me. In fact, my house is hot all the time too. I have fans on me constantly, but anyways. Yeah, so we're going to talk about 1969 and finish out the 60s. It's hard to say. Possibly my favorite decade. 70s is good too, but man, 60s have some really, really incredible stuff. 69 was a really good year too. I kind of was a little down on 68. 68, I don't know, it had a little too much, what was it called? Psychedelic rock. The psychedelic rock was just a little too psychedelic for me, I guess. And I wasn't as big a fan of that year, though it had a couple of really good albums, of course. 69 I thought was a much better year. I thought this ended the 60s on a really good note. We have some absolute classics and some albums that are high up on my own list of favorite albums of all time. Anyway, so yeah. Again, a year we get a lot of good hard rock music. Beatles put out one of their most famous albums. We're getting Led Zeppelin, so we're really starting into more hard rock of the time with the Led Zeppelin coming out. Still got great stuff from, Rolling Stones, CCR, and we got so many new bands. I mean, a lot of great new bands are starting out this year that I'll talk about as well. Anyways, The Who are putting out some of their best work. Yeah, it's definitely a really good year for, I would say, rock music. Though I did really like Joni Mitchell, her Clouds album, which was like her second album, but first big album. Really good folk album, so we're still getting some good folk stuff here as well. It's funny, I don't really have any psychedelic rock necessarily in my list, so I don't know if there was much psychedelic rock this year, or if I just did not, none of it made it into my list, so I didn't, think about it too much. Like I said, we're getting some pretty good hard rocking bands, though, at this time, I would say. Plus the British Invasion bands are just doing really great as well, so, and we'll continue on in the 70s, so. Let's get to the top 10 best-selling albums of '69. Best-selling album is Tommy from The Who. Yeah, interesting. I was not expecting Tommy to be number one. I didn't realize it was that big of an album, but evidently, pretty huge album. Probably the biggest album to this date. There's another album coming up, maybe that's even bigger. But Tommy definitely one of the biggest selling albums that The Who ever put out. In my opinion, the best album up to that date. Of course, their debut was a decent debut. It made in my top 10 in '65. My Generation, had two pretty big hit songs on there. Their second album to me was not that good. It's definitely one of their weakest albums. Then The Who Saw It was a strong album. It had one really huge hit on there. But yeah, I would say The Who was still trying to find themselves, I think, as a band. And they really did with this album, Tommy. It's the first, as far as I know, it's like the first rock opera ever. I mean, what incredible, very ambitious album for Pete Townsend to put together. Basically, Pete Townsend wrote this album, wrote the songs, wrote the story. I mean, so it's interesting. This is the first time I've heard an album that told a story. I mean, I said, I never heard of rock operas before until I heard this album. Back when I was, a teenager, and I was blown away by it. That wow, it's like you're listening to like a musical, but it's rocking. It's a rock musical basically. with the story and characters and all that. Very interesting with interludes, instrumental interludes that are really interesting. Yeah, really well written by Townsend. I know most people are huge on this album, like I am. If you're a Who fan, this is my, I believe it's my third favorite Who album. So yeah, one of their best. And interesting. They would do another. I think the next album there's going to be a rock opera, but then they end up being a regular album. Then the next album, Quadrophenia, was another rock opera album. So Townsend really got into doing rock opera. That was kind of becoming his thing at this point. Of course, this is the best-selling one that he did so far anyway. So yeah, really cool to see Tommy here. And Tommy, again, was in my top 10. It was my number 4 favorite album of the year. And I believe it made top 10s of 2 of the other members. Scott and Nick had in their top 10. In fact, I think they both had like number 2 on their list. Number 2, number 3, I had number 4. So we all had pretty high on our list. So a good number 1, I would say. Definitely one that I think a lot of people have on their list as one of the best albums this year, is the best-selling album. So that's cool to see. Number 2 is Abbey Road from the Beatles. I mean, yeah, Abbey Road. I'm kind of surprised this is not number 1. This is definitely considered their greatest album by many. I actually had number 2 of the year. I actually had one album better than this, but it was the favorite album of both Scott and Breyer, 2 other members, and that kind of did the top 10 with me. No surprise there. A lot of people would have Abbey Road as number 1 on their list of best albums. This was number 2 on my list, so definitely an album that I really enjoy. Of course, I'm a big Beatles fan. It's a classic. It's got some of their best music with Come Together, Something, Here Comes the Sun. I mean, absolute incredible classics for me. Yeah, so what am I going to say? Abbey Road. Yeah, no surprise at number 2 here. And we only got one more Beatles albums to cover, so the Beatles are going to drop out of the top 10. Of course, we're going to have the solo stuff coming up. Number 3 is Led Zeppelin 2. And number 4 is Led Zeppelin. So Led Zeppelin has the 3 and 4th spot. So pretty good debut for Led Zeppelin. Very first year for Led Zeppelin coming out. And of course, they kind of were members of, at least it kind of started with Jimmy Page being part of the Yardbirds. And then he started like the new Yardbirds, which then turned into Led Zeppelin. And he kind of recruited the other members basically of the group. And they really just changed rock music to me in the sense that I don't think anybody was doing what they were doing. Was hard rock riffs, and I mean, I know other people were doing stuff like that, but I don't know, they just were loud and incredible rock riffs, and drumming was absolutely incredible, like nothing I've heard before. Yeah, just absolutely incredible stuff. I really like Led Zeppelin 2. It was actually number 3 on my list. Interesting, 3rd best-selling album, also my 3rd favorite album of the year, so kind of coincides with this list. I'm not a big fan of Led Zeppelin, but I know a lot of Led Zeppelin fans love the first Led Zeppelin. It was just a little too bluesy for me, not enough big hits, rock hits that are catchy and have good rock riffs that I like. Led Zeppelin 2, of course, has one of my favorite songs, A Whole Lot of Love. Starts the album, one of the best openers ever, anyways, and it has like 4 or 5 huge hits on that album. I mean, it is a great album. So really glad to see it made it pretty high on here. And Led Zeppelin, what a bang, coming out in 1969. Yeah, already hitting in the top 5. Number 5 is Crosby, Stills and Nash by Crosby, Stills and Nash. And this was my favorite album of the year. So I'm glad to see it hit in top 5 best-selling albums, because it was my favorite album of this year. And it's my 5th favorite album of all time. So it's a top 5 album of all time. It's my favorite album this year. So yeah, really great album. Really makes 69 a great year when you have these. It's funny, these first 5 albums in the top 10, 4 of them are my top 4 albums of the year, and are my top 100 favorite albums. Crosby, Stills, Nash, Abbey Road, Led Zeppelin 2, and Tommy. That's my top 4, and they all reached top 5. The only one that doesn't is Led Zeppelin. I'm not as big fan, of course, like I said, of that first album, but still really cool to see Crosby, Stills, Nash get in here. Of course, debut album. Also, a pretty incredible debut album. Here you got Led Zeppelin debut album, Crosby, Stills, Nash debut album, all making it here in top 5. I love this album so much. I mean, Sweet Judy Blue Eyes is one of my favorite songs of all time. Absolutely incredible. One of the best harmony groups of all time. It's like the first supergroup. You might say Cream is the first supergroup, but to me, like Crosby, Stills, Nash is the real first big supergroup for me, and the best supergroup of all time. I mean, when you have members from, Crosby from the Byrds, Steven Stills from Buffalo Springfield, and Graham Nash from the Hollies. All bands I've covered on the channel, actually. I'm a big fan of all three bands. So, I mean, you got three Hall of Fame bands, and they perform this Hall of Fame supergroup. Definitely, I can't recommend enough. Definitely check that album out. Number 6 is Blood, Sweat, and Tears by Blood, Sweat, and Tears, which this is actually their second album. Their debut album came out, I think, the year before or something. And yeah, interesting album. They had the one big song I know on it, which I'm not going to remember on top of my mind. But once someone says it, I'm going to say, oh yeah, it's that song. But I know they had one or two big hits off this album. I don't know Blood, Sweat, Tears that much, except I've heard this album, their debut album, which I like their debut album actually better than this album. Their debut album actually made my honorable mention when that came out. This did not. I wasn't that big of a fan of this album. To me, they felt a lot like Chicago, but not as good as Chicago. They have the horn section, and they kind of do a similar style. But I don't know, they just weren't as good as Chicago. So to me, it's like, man, why listen to them when I can listen to Chicago, who I think is actually even sounds even better than them. So, but yeah, it did very, very well, this album. As we'll talk about the Grammys as well. It did very well in that area too. Anyways, yeah, so that's number 6. Number 7, we got Let It Bleed by the Rolling Stones. Definitely one of the biggest albums from the Rolling Stones, and I think considered one of their best. It's actually one of my favorite of theirs. It's like a top 5 favorite album of Rolling Stones, and I'm not a big Rolling Stones fan, so take that as you will. This did not make my top 10 albums, but it was in my honorable mention, so it was good enough to get an honorable mention for me. It has 2 of their biggest songs, I think, Give Me Shelter and You Can't Always Get What You Want, which is my favorite Rolling Stones song. So the album has my favorite Stones song on it. That's why I had to put it as honorable mention. It did make the top 10 of my other 3 members that did the top 10 with me. Scott, Nick, and Briar all had in their top 10. So this is obviously probably a lot of people's top 10s, and it's one of their most famous albums, like I said, and for good reason. It definitely belongs here in the top 10. Number 8, we got At San Quentin by Johnny Cash. Of course, he had At Fools in Prison. Live album was huge, probably his biggest album of all time. This is also, I know, a huge album. I haven't heard it, so I can't say too much about it. I haven't listened to either Johnny Cash live albums, which I probably should at some point. I know they're big live albums, and I don't know what exactly is on here, but I know it's a big album for him. So cool to see Johnny Cash in here. Number 9, we got Green River by CCR. CCR actually put out 3 albums this year. I mean, they were extreme, and their debut album came out the year before, which was just their self-titled album. And then they put out like something, I'm forgetting their second album already, but something, I think it's something by you. Then their third album, I believe, was Green River. Then the fourth album is Willie and the Poor Boys, which finished 11th on this list. Actually, barely misses the top 10, Willie and the Poor Boys. So pretty good, having 3 albums come out, and 2 of them are pretty big. One top 10, one at the number 11 spot. Interesting, I think Willie and the Poor Boys is a much better album. That was in my top. In fact, Willie and the Poor Boys, I think, was the only album that made all 4 top 10s in my group. So we all really liked Willie and the Poor Boys. Briar actually had Green River in his top 10. He was the only one that had that album in the top 10, and I had it as an honorable mention. I mean, it's a solid album. Again, I didn't do enough research right now. I've heard the album a couple times. I know it has a couple of pretty good songs on it. While Willie and the Poor Boys has Unfortunate Son and Down by the Corner. Some really amazing songs off of that album. And Cotton Fields is one we all like as well. But anyway, so yeah, CTR are doing very well with those 2 albums. And then to finish out the top 10, we got Chicago Transit Authority by Chicago. So Chicago's debut album. So we got a couple debut albums here, with Chicago doing their debut album, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, their debut album, Led Zeppelin, their debut album. All 3 debut albums making top 10. And yeah, Chicago Transit Authority, I feel like, is maybe their most famous album. I may be wrong about that. I've listened to a couple of their albums, so I can't say if it's my favorite yet. The next album is pretty good as well. My only problem is the first 3 albums I know at least are all double albums. It's like, she's Chicago, a little too much, I think. I wish they would have not had so many double albums to start their career. But it does have, I believe, Saturday, or does anybody know what time it is? I think is the big song on here, and it has, I know, another big one. I think in Only the Beginnings or something like that, I think is on this album. I don't have this album, but I have Chicago 2 and 3 on vinyl, actually. definitely need to get this one vinyl because it made my honorable mention. It made Scott's top 10, so Scott had it in his top 10 as well. And definitely a really good album. Chicago is such a cool band with the horn section and everybody. I mean, it's got 3 really great singers. Peter Cetera, whatever, Lamb. Cetera is the bass player, Lamb's the keyboard player, and then you got Tony Kath is the guitar player, who's an amazing guitar player. Oh my gosh, one of the best guitar players at this time. Anyways, but yeah, so you got Chicago here, finishing out top 10. So really good top 10 overall. Like I said, 4 of them made it in my top 4 albums, and then you got, you know, Let It Bleed, Green River, Chicago Transit Authority all made it my honorable mention. So you say 7 of these albums are at least albums that I really enjoyed on this list. So definitely we're getting to a point. I'm curious to how the 70s are going to go. Hopefully it continues in this trend where it feels like the albums that are selling very well are also albums that I really love, or my favorite albums of the year. So it seems like 69 is a very good year where the top selling albums are also kind of coinciding with my personal favorites as well, which is really cool. And not just my personal favorites, but I think the personal favorites, a lot of people I talk to that are fans of this era. In fact, every album on here in the top 10 made it into at least one top 10 of me and my friends, except for at San Quentin and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Those are only 2 albums that make it on any list, interesting enough. But anyways, yeah, good top 10 there. So let's go to who got nominated and who won Grammy Album of the Year. What did the Grammys think of this year? The winner, Grammy of the Album of the Year, is to me kind of a weird one, but not terrible choice. And that is Blood, Sweat, and Tears by Blood and Sweat and Tears. Again, kind of an odd choice for me when you have Abbey Road. I mean, come on, Abbey Road. How do you not give the Grammy to Abbey Road? I think looking back, they must be thinking, what an idiot we are to not give it to Abbey Road. I mean, the Beatles only won 1 Album of the Year Grammy. That was for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And you're like, Rubber Soul, then how did the Rubber Soul not win? How did Revolver not win? How did Abbey Road not win? I mean, those, to me, at least 3 of those should have won. Beatles should have at least 3 Album of the Year Grammys. It's insane that they only have 1. And this, to me, was a surefire no-brainer. But anyways. But the good news is Abbey Road did get nominated for the Grammy Album of the Year, which definitely deserved it. We also have The Age of Aquarius by The Fifth Dimension got nominated. Interesting pick there. Again, I didn't mention it at all. It wasn't in the top 10 albums, and neither me or my other 3 friends had it in their top 10. No, in fact, nobody even had this in the honorable mention or talked about this album. So it's definitely an album that we're not, me and the people in my group, I don't think are all that knowledgeable about. And I know The Fifth Dimension. I've heard of them. I actually have a Greatest Hits album that was given to me by my friend Robert from New York, and that's all I really know about Fifth Dimension. I know The Age of Aquarius was a big song for them. Anyway, so I can't say too much about that. Probably deserving album there, though there's other ones probably maybe more deserving. But anyways, we also got Crosby, Stills, and Nash. My favorite album of the year got nominated for a Grammy. Again, I would love it for it to win. That would have been awesome, but still, the fact that I got nominated, I'm very happy about that. They acknowledged that was a really great album. And then lastly, we got At San Quentin by Johnny Cash. Again, talked about it, made top 10 best-selling albums. It's one of his biggest, probably 2 biggest albums are this and the At Fool's in Prison album. His 2 live albums are pretty huge. I haven't listened to it, so I can't say too much about it, but I know it's a big one there. So overall, not a bad group, actually. I criticize the Grammys a lot because they throw in a lot of weird choices, and you always get Frank Sinatra or Barbra Streisand in there. You get Herb Alpert in the brass band. You get all these, I don't know, to me, kind of weird choices. Not weird, but definitely when you got all these famous rock bands putting out some of the greatest music of all time, and then you go with these 50s acts or these, big band albums, it's like, what are you doing, Grammys? But this is actually overall a pretty good list here. You got, the Beatles, you got Crosby, Stills, Nash, you got Johnny Cash, Fifth Dimension, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, all very relevant bands at that time. So that's all I'm asking for Grammys. Nominate albums that are very relevant, that did very well that year, and I guess you can't guess the future, but are going to be considered great in the future. Again, Abbey Road should have won here, but and the fact that Tommy didn't get nominated, Led Zeppelin 2 or Led Zeppelin should have got nominated here, or Let It Bleed from Rolling Stones probably should have got nominated. So, I mean, Willie and the Poor Boys. I mean, there's a lot of albums that definitely belonged and could have been nominated as well. But overall, pretty good top 10 best-selling album list and top 5 albums for Grammys. Maybe the best list we've seen so far up to this point. All right, next we're going to talk a little about some of the big moments that happened in 1969, finishing out the 60s here. First note I have is on January 30th, the Beatles have the rooftop concert, which kind of finishes out their Let It Be documentary. We actually just covered Let It Be on Jacob Martin's channel. Me and the other members talked all about Let It Be. In fact, it's been over 2 hours talking about the album and our favorite songs on it, and talked about having the rooftop concert. I have been to London. Rooftop, of course, is in London on I think it's EMI or whatever, somewhere around there. That the rooftop. I have a picture somewhere of the roof, not the roof, but of the building that they played the rooftop on. So I have a picture of that actually in one of my books, one of my picture books, anyways. So I got to see where that happened, anyways, which is pretty cool. Back in 2015, like 10 years ago is when I actually went and saw that. Anyways, but yeah, it's the last time we see the Beatles do a concert together. So to me, as a Beatles fan, of course, it's a huge, monumental moment. Ends the career of the greatest band of all time, in my opinion. And of course, at that time, they weren't doing concerts. Of course, in '66, they quit doing concerts. So we've had at least 2 years to almost 3 years of no concerts. I guess not quite 3, but between 2 and 3 years of not seeing the Beatles really do concerts or anything. And this is not really much of a concert. They only play like 4 or 5 songs, and it's not very long. It's just something they want to do to finish out the documentary. In the documentary, on a good note. It is a good note. It is the songs are really good. I know they play I've Got a Feeling, Don't Let Me Down, Get Back, kind of the big ones. I think they do One After 1099, which is the worst song on the album. And I think they do Dig a Pony, I think, as well. So they only pick a couple songs from that album. And they didn't cover the best stuff on the album in that rooftop. Anyways, still, we won't get to see them again ever again because they just never got back together. And then once John Lennon died in 1980, the Beatles will never be able to get back together. It really sucks. So that's a monumental time. I wrote down February 18th, Maurice Gibb marries Lulu, which I didn't know they got married. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. Kind of, big members of the rock pop, or I say pop, I shouldn't say rock, more of the pop music at the time. Maurice Gibb from the Bee Gees. Lulu was also had a hit song, I think just maybe a year before, maybe or so. She had a #1 hit, so I don't know what happened with their marriage. Haven't covered that, so. March 1st, Jim Morrison is arrested at a concert in Miami, allegedly exposing himself to the audience. Now, this is one of the big scandal moments for Jim Morrison and the Doors, which they have a couple. Of course, I talked about they got kind of banned from the Ed Sullivan Show because they were told not to say can't get much higher, but they said, yeah, we won't say that, and then Morrison does it. Morrison's very rebellious, of course. And again, this is allegedly, because I don't think Morrison or maybe the Doors think that he actually did expose himself, but that's what the police arrested him for. Anyways, which is, again, pretty big scandal for him. Again, maybe it didn't happen, but you can tell that the police are just looking for an excuse to arrest Jim Morrison because he was kind of out of control at this period of time, with the drugs and everything. March 12th, Paul and Linda get married in London. Yeah, so Paul marries his wife, who they were married till Linda died, Linda Eastman, who now becomes Linda McCartney. So really great love story. I mean, one of the great love stories I think we've seen where Paul stays married for the rest of Linda's life. And if Linda was still alive today, they'd still be married, I think. So really great marriage I thought they had. And I know they had a couple kids together as well. But yeah, this was kind of big for the moment because Paul was the last Beatle to get married. I was kind of seeing the last Bachelor of the Beatles. And it's like, is Paul ever going to get married? He's still like in his I mean, he might be like in his late 20s by this point, but it's like a big deal that Paul hadn't gotten married yet. And Paul made Linda, because Linda was a photographer, and she did a lot of photography, or a lot of in photography with rock bands and musicians and stuff like that. And because she was kind of a pretty blonde, she was able to get close to the rock musicians who, you know, if she was a man, they'd probably be like, you know, get away, we don't care. Because she's a pretty blonde, the rock musician was like, yeah, you can take my picture. And then they can hit on her, ask her out. In fact, I remember reading a book, it said that Linda, I think, went on a date with Mick Jagger as well before she met Paul. So she was not unused to being hit on by rock musicians. And of course, she did a photography of the Beatles at one point, and Paul met her there, and then he met her again at somewhere else, and then asked her out, and they started dating, and then they got married here in '69. So really cool overall relationship story. One of the best ones we've seen. Now, the next story, March 20th, John Lennon marries Yoko Ono in Gibraltar. Now, no coincidence that Lennon gets married about a week later, because again, and it's funny, when Paul got married, you know, all the girls went crazy. They're like, oh my God, we're never gonna, you know, all the girls thought they had a shot at marrying a Beatle, but it's like, no, you don't. And so Paul married everybody. Oh, they hated Linda. Oh my gosh. Girls hated Linda, because, oh my gosh, how dare you marry one of the Beatles, and now we can't. Anyway, so that was a big deal. But anyways, John Lennon was, of course, he was married to Cynthia because he got her pregnant. He got her pregnant and then married her, because even though he's not religious, in the 60s, it was still common to get married if you got the girl pregnant. That was just kind of the thing you did. So he didn't really want to marry Cynthia. He wasn't totally in love with Cynthia. Of course, he cheated on her quite a bit all throughout the relationship. In fact, cheating on her with Yoko Ono, who he met at an art exhibit thing, and which I have a picture of where they met as well in my book. But anyways, he starts liking her, cheating on her with him, cheating on Cynthia with Yoko. Cynthia actually finds them at the apartment as he's cheating on her and files for divorce. They get divorced, and of course, Lennon and Yoko become kind of inseparable, to the point that Yoko's showing up at like the White Album as they're making the White Album, which is annoying the other Beatles. But then here, after Paul and Linda get married, I think John didn't like that Paul was getting all this, you know, press about their marriage, and so it feels like that's why he's like, hey, let's get married, because I want some of the, you know, press to be on me and not just on Paul, you know. So I think there's some problems there with Yoko, because she was Japanese and she didn't, you know, and they made it pretty hard on them. They couldn't get married in England for some reason, so they ended up going to Gibraltar, and they were allowed to get married there. And of course, he writes a hit song, The Ballad of John and Yoko, which becomes a #1 hit off of all that. But yeah, that happens there. June 13th, Mick Taylor joins the Rolling Stones, and that was because they kicked out Brian Jones. Brian Jones, unfortunately, he was kind of one of the founding members of the Rolling Stones. I did a whole deep dive on the Rolling Stones, and he was definitely, I think, considered the best musician out of the group. Very vital to the early period of the Rolling Stones. But at this point, there's kind of a shift in power, because Mick Jagger and Keith Richards was writing songs together, and they were writing hit songs together. And so they kind of became more of the lead, or the power of the Rolling Stones, and kind of got to call the shots. Brian Jones kind of got depressed at this point, was doing a lot of drugs, was just not being, he just was no good. He just was too drugged out to really be helpful during rehearsals, or he was showing up late, or he was just so drugged out he couldn't do anything. So because of that, they kicked him out, because he was just, you know, the drugs were just making him useless, I guess, as a musician. You know, he couldn't, you know, help out, or, you know, contribute to the band. So they unfortunately had to kick him out. Mick Taylor joins at this point, taking over his guitar, I guess, one of the guitar players. Unfortunately, this goes into the next story, which is July 3rd. Brian Jones is found dead in the swimming pool. So one of the members of the 27 Club, in fact, someone said he's probably the first member, died at age 27, did drugs, passed out, drowned in the swimming pool. So very sad. Again, got kicked out and then died shortly after. August 9th, I'm just going to mention, this is the Charles Manson family murder that murdered Sharon Tate and some others at the home. Sharon Tate was an actress. She was married to Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski was not there. So the Manson family, of course, murdered all of them. Charles Manson kind of has some connection with the Beach Boys because he was kind of became somewhat friends with Dennis Wilson, and he even wrote a song that appeared on a Beach Boys album. And also he wrote the Manson family wrote Helter Skelter, which was, of course, a Beatles song off the White Album. So that's kind of connections with some of the music at the time. But unfortunate, horrible murder that happened. And then they got Charles Manson, and a lot of the members went to prison for life. Manson, a very weird dude who I think is still in prison. He might have died by now. I can't remember. All right, maybe the biggest moment that we need to talk about is August 15th through 17th. We have one of probably the most famous concert of all time, and that's Woodstock. Yeah, Woodstock, 1969, kind of finishing out the 60s. Definitely this big hippie kind of movement that's going on. I mean, it's just these guys want to put up this concert and get some of the biggest acts of the time together in Woodstock, New York. It was like a farm, or I want to say some farmland that they were able to secure for this concert. And they had way more people, I think, than they expected. So it was a huge deal. It was seen as this, very hippie, peace and love kind of thing. And they had some big names. I mean, to me, the two best performances is The Who and Crosby, Stills, and Nash & Young. Give really great performances. Of course, Jimi Hendrix, really great as well, with his rendition of the national anthem. I know CCR was there, Santana was there, and I'm sure there's other ones I'm not thinking. But the Beatles weren't there, Rolling Stones wasn't there, Led Zeppelin wasn't there. So, I mean, they were missing some big bands. Not everybody was there, but still it's considered like monumental time of the 60s, kind of fishing out the 60s with this huge concert that we still kind of think about today. And I said I think we're talking about 69 on my channel, I said, and every time they try to redo Woodstock, it never works out. It is kind of a concert that doesn't work very well. Concerts that do better, I think, are the Monterey Pop Festival and the Isle of Wight Festival. Are also big venues. I know today, I think there's Coachella is like a big thing, and there's some other big concert venues where they get big bands. But Woodstock was definitely an interesting one. That is definitely in the history books, especially because the documentary won like an Oscar for Best Documentary. So that's kind of made it famous. All right, last news item I'm going to talk about is August 30th. Bob Dylan makes his first concert appearance after his at the Isle of Wight Festival since his motorcycle wreck. He had a motorcycle accident. I think he went a year without really being seen or doing any kind of music, kind of healing from all that. Probably almost died from that. And now we're seeing him back. So it's nice to see Bob Dylan back from almost dying from that anyway. So that's kind of a big deal at the moment. All right, I'm gonna finish this by talking about new artists that came out. A lot of huge artists coming out this year. Definitely a big year. Led Zeppelin's the big one. The two Led Zeppelin 1, Led Zeppelin 2, two huge albums. And to me, one of my favorite rock bands of all time, and one of the most important ones of the 70s, I would say, as well. Genesis actually gets their first album this year, Genesis to Revelation, which did not do very well, but they really didn't know what they were doing. It was a bad idea for an album. It's definitely a weak album. The next album, they would then go into their prog. They start their prog rock kind of albums. They had to fire like their manager and get like a new record deal with a new, because their album did so bad and they had to go in a different direction. We got Joe Cocker here. I don't know much except for he was at Woodstock and he sang A Little Help from My Friends, which is a really good rendition of that. We got Chicago, as I mentioned, their debut album did very well at Chicago Transit Authority, and they would have a great career as well. I love Chicago. Crosby, Stills, Nash, as I mentioned, they're more of a super group, so it's they're different because they didn't make that many albums, but they'd make an album. Then they had their own solo projects. They even did some duo projects. So the members were all over the place. Young, of course, would join the next year for the Deja Vu album as well. Actually, Elton John debuted this year with Empty Sky. People probably don't know much about that. That wasn't a very big album. I think it's actually a pretty good album. Doesn't have any big hits on it. It wasn't a big one for him. The next album, I think, that comes out maybe next year, the Elton John self-titled album, has the Your Song on it, which was a huge hit, kind of the first huge hit for him. But yeah, Elton John coming out though in this year. Roberta Flack I had to mention because she had some huge hits around this time. Alice Cooper, of course, I don't know much about him except that he's famous for his antics and all that. Nick Drake, another member I don't know much about, except Pink Moon, I think, is his big album, and he was kind of a big, not big, because I said, I don't think not many people have heard of him, but people that like music, I've heard people mention him. We have Yes. Yes is another big prog rock band. I know my friend Briar's a huge fan of Yes. I'm not a fan of Yes. They're a little too prog rock for me, but they would have some big prog rock albums coming up. We got the Stooges. Again, I don't know much about Stooges, but they're like one of the first, like, I think, punk rock bands out there. Santana, as I mentioned, he was at Woodstock, and one of the great guitar players, Latin guitar players there is. Janis Joplin kind of made her debut at this time, though she was with another band called the Holding Company, but this is when she kind of ventured out into solo work. We have the Carpenters, of course, great duo, the Carpenter brother and sister, coming out this time. I don't know much about I can't say too much, so I know they're big hits, but that's about it. King Crimson I was going to mention because they're very vital in the prog rock. They only had really one big album, and that was the album that came out this year, the Court of the King Crimson, or the Crimson King, Court of the Crimson King, I think it's called. I'm not a fan of the album. It's a little too prog rock for me, but I know Briar loves this album. It was his second favorite album of the year. Scott had it in his top 10, so I know prog rock people love this album. John Denver, one of my favorite musicians of all time, actually debuted this year. In fact, he has a song about wishing he was at Woodstock. He wasn't at Woodstock, but I know he watched it and wishes he was there. But yeah, his first big hit was Leaving on a Jet Plane, which actually was a hit song before he did it with Peter, Paul, and Mary. So he had a hit song even before he debuted here. I don't remember the name of the debut album, but we have the Allman Brothers Band debuting with their self-titled album, which again, Briar had in his top 10. Briar really likes the Allman Brothers Band. To me, they're a little too bluesy for me. I didn't like their first album. I know they're going to have some big hits coming up, though. We have Mott the Hoople. Again, don't know much about him, but he's big in the glam rock era that's going to come up here pretty soon. We got Rod Stewart, who was the lead singer of another band, I believe, and now he's going solo. Of course, I've listened to like one album of his, but I'm not a fan, but I know a lot of people like Rod Stewart. He definitely has a distinct voice. And then I'm going to end with the Jackson 5, also another big group at this time. Obviously, little Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, very young, lead singer of this. In fact, their debut album this year, I had it in my honorable mentions. I actually kind of liked it. I liked their early hits with like the ABC, 1, 2, 3, whatever. And I forget their other songs. They had like 2 big hits off this album. I actually kind of enjoy it anyway. So yeah. So those are the big new artists. A lot to talk about here. Anyways, but yeah. Hope you enjoyed kind of going down memory lane of 1969 and getting to learn a little bit what happened this year. What were the big bands and albums of this year, and what me and my friends thought. Of course, getting a little bit of that as well. Definitely comment if you have a favorite band or album that came out this year and what you remember coming out in 1969, if you remember that year. Anyway, besides that, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for liking it. Thank you to all my subscribers for supporting the channel. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a good day.